Hello and welcome to The Volvo Presents Making Very Hard Difficulty WC Setups Very Easy, explaining how I went about a recent very hard difficulty world conquest, one tag world conquest. So, this was done by means of completing a sufficiently speedy revoke. How did I do this? I did this by ensuring a stable, almost perpetually peaceful empire with many princes. I completed the reign in northern Italy and Shadow Kingdom problem. I mitigated heretic problems, and then I'll also discuss a little bit about preparing and baking your layer cakes. So, a primer, imperial authority, is what you use to pass reforms, and the reforms, or more accurately, the revoke the privilegier reform, is the sort of goal, the first big goal for this world conquest. Now, you gain imperial authority every month, as can be broken down there. The total that you currently have stored up is the white number. The green number is the amount you get every month, and then in the little hover breakdown, you can see what you're gaining and losing it from. Most notably, the heaviest, strongest modifiers are internal peace in the empire, plus 0.1, and for the number of princes, above 25, plus 0.14. And there's also a -1 for all of the land that Burgundy has, and Denmark has Holstein, and Provence has Lorraine, that are non-HRE members that have HRE land. Now, your monthly rate of imperial authority at the start is given in the first box, 0.18, assuming that you have a 20% bonus, 10% from Austria's idea, national idea, and 10% more from having completed one of the improve relations with elector missions. We're going to get you a total of a 20% bonus. We'll give you the number in the brackets underneath. Then, in the column to the right of that is how long it will take you to earn 50 imperial authority at that ticking rate in years. So if you're at 0.18 monthly imperial authority, it takes 23 years to get up to 50. Or if you're at 0.22, it takes 19 after the bonus. And that is how much you start with. You start with the 0.18, but you also start with 20 imperial authority in the bank. Now, once you get all of those HRE lands back under HRE control by either having Burgundy die and give the lands back to you, by going and beating up, Denmark and Provence to give them back, then you'll get up to about 0.27 or 0.33 after the bonuses, which brings it down to about a 14 or 13 year rate for getting enough imperial authority to pass a reform. Now, what are the reforms? Well, nabbed from the wiki is the list of the reforms below, and we'll be discussing some of the important features there. So, at the first reform, you get the Imperial Ban Casus Belli, which is the Casus Belli that lets you force Burgundy and Denmark and whatnot to give back those imperial lands that they hold. Very useful. Just be careful when you're doing that not to take too much aggressive expansion yourself, because if you take the land for yourself rather than releasing the princes out of it, you will get aggressive expansion. Next reform gives you some Diplo rep, which is terribly useful. The one after that gives you core cost reduction, which is lovely. The one after that, another bit of Diplo rep. Then the one after that, Landsfried, gives you HRE princes cannot declare war on one another, which we'll be discussing. Then the Proclaim Erbeskaisertum, I can't say it properly, gives you no longer have to get voted to become the emperor. It just stays with whoever it is, but you no longer get the 10 imperial authority when your king dies and a new emperor was elected. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And importantly, if the empire hasn't already had an official faith declared, the Peace of Westphalia is declared, and you will get half the penalty for heretic princes. The one after that is the reform after this is the one that is actually the target, which is revoke the privilegia. All of the princes who support the reform become vassals of the emperor, and because of the reform before that, they don't use Diplo relation slots. So you can have about 50, let's say, HRE vassals, and none of them use a relationship slot. Now, how are we going to get this reform done quickly? Well, typically the problem is that the princes attack and annex each other, as well as that you, as Austria, are meant to sort of protect the empire from outside threats, such as France or Burgundy or Poland or Denmark. Now, when the princes eat each other, they get rid of the peace within the empire modifier, and they also start eating into the number of princes. The solution that I proposed, and that was executed in this run, was to literally guarantee every single HRE prince, and also East Frisia, and ally as many as possible. East Frisia was done because otherwise the princes use East Frisia as a sort of reason to get to war with each other. Whereas if you go into East Frisia as well, then they don't try and declare on East Frisia and get called into war against each other because they're allied to East Frisia. Now we'll show a bit of a video explanation of how you get all of those simultaneous guarantees and as many relationships as possible. So let's have a look at how you'd go about doing this. Well, you literally just find every single prince and click Proclaim Guarantee. It takes a while to go around and do every single one, but it certainly can be done. Now, the other trick is getting as many of them as possible as allies. Now, the game tries to prevent you from doing this by presenting you with this modifier. Austria have too many Diplo relations. But you can bypass this for basically every single monarchy type government. You ask for access. Access means that you no longer don't have any relation with them, you have a relation. Suddenly, they'll be willing to marry you, whereas before they had too many Diplo relations, so you can marry them. And then once you've married them, you can ally them. And you can repeat this again and again and again until you've got basically the whole empire inside your belt. Well, as your guarantees and allies. So let's skip to that. So, a lot of clicks of Proclaim Guarantee, marry, ask for access later. We have an empire in which we have sort of about a third of the swarm. You could go and get some more like Cleves and East Frisia, but I haven't done that yet. And it becomes easier and easier to do this as you start passing more reforms because you gain Diplo rep, which means you can overcome people's unwillingness to be allies with you despite the fact that you're possibly allied to one of their rivals. Similarly, as you complete your Austrian ideas, it becomes easier for the same reason. Cool. Okay, now that you have the majority of the HRE as allies, allowing you to call them in defense of the Empire, which basically guarantees that aside from certain missions, that the AI shouldn't attack you, the princes will leave each other alone, assuming you keep your own personal force limit and manpower high enough. Though it can be helpful to exercise any militant allies, and any princes that get big external allies outside the Empire. As long as it's before, I mean, this doesn't apply obviously once they can't declare war on each other. An example of this would be a militant Brandenburg that has Poland as an ally. Eventually, that militant Brandenburg is going to try and expand, probably into Pomerania or Mecklenburg or Lüneburg. And one way you can sort of help prevent this is by calling that Brandenburg into wars repeatedly to get his manpower down, to get him high on loans, so that he doesn't want to declare his own wars. Or alternatively, you can try and do the same thing to his big ally Poland. If you can call Poland into multiple wars, drain Poland's manpower, drain Poland's money, then he won't want to join Brandenburg's war when Brandenburg tries to declare war inside the Empire. Step 2, the reign in northern Italy Shadow Kingdom issue. So if before 1490, you can control northern Italy, the region, except Venice, then the Italian HRE states don't leave the empire. This helps keep ticking imperial authority high because it maintains a larger number of princes, and it also minimizes the chance for external wars within the empire, etc. So what do you actually have to do? Well, indicated in the sort of orangish circles are the regions you have to add to the empire. You can do this just by coring the land and adding it, or if you control/vassalize everything there, there's a decision that adds them to the empire automatically as part of the decision. Now you need all of the land that is within those orange circles except Venice itself. You do not need Venice itself. In order to get these lands, my personal suggestion is, at the start, ally Milan and quite possibly Hungary if he hates Venice, promising land as soon as the Milanese truce in 47 is done. Declare for Verona for yourself, take Verona for yourself, give Milan Brescia, give Hungary either Istria or Dalmatia as you're feeling generous, and leave Treviso and Friuli for later, because you're going to want to go to war with the Pope. You need those Pope lands. Now, here we see one of the problems for declaring war on the Pope, is that he has lots of friends who will honour his alliances, and it's so early in the game that you can't really call very many people in easily on favours. But there is an easy little trick. In about September, October, the Pope will finish integrating Urbino. So we could see in the previous slide here that he has Urbino as a vassal. He finishes annexing them and takes the annexed a vassal Diplo rep hit, which means that all his allies go from being happy to honour his alliance to bom bom bom, we don't like the Pope anymore, he annexed someone, he's got a bad Diplo reputation, we're not going to honour his alliance, allowing you to go to war with the Pope with a much reduced ally set, and it's a much easier war. But there's another reason also. As soon as he annexes the land, it goes from being a 100%, a 0% autonomy vassal, because it's capital of the vassal Urbino, to being 60% autonomy owned by the Pope. That autonomy modifies the province war score cost for taking that province of Urbino, and that means that if you strike quickly enough after he annexes the vassal, you can take all the land you need in a single war, whereas if you try and do this while it's still at 0 autonomy, it's slightly too expensive. Now, you might think that taking all of that, trying to take this when you've got all of the alliances that we talked about would be a problem, but you can get the Diplo to do this from the merchant interaction, and as well as by completing the rival of a rival mission, depending on how far you want to push the merchant's influence. And you might also think that this is a deadly amount of AE, but the truth is, because you've allied most of the HRE, they get far less AE with you, and your defensive alliance structure is so strong that the nations that remain outside that could try to coalition you don't want to, or they might form a coalition, but they're unlikely to actually declare because of your alliance structure, as long as you stay outside of huge, nasty, stupid wars and lose too much of your force limited manpower. Third, mitigating heretic problems. So, once you've completed reign in northern Italy, perhaps gone and smacked Burgundy and Provence and Denmark for their HRE lands, being careful, as was mentioned, to not take much of that land for yourself, but rather release the provinces, because you'll get even more AE, although I personally hold that Holstein is extremely strategically useful. You'll have about 120-ish years that it'll take to pass the reforms. I suggest taking religious first, and that at around 1500, as it's about to turn 1500, go and unguarantee Bohemia and any of the other princes that you personally border really, and swap over to, instead of using guarantees to protect them from each other, instead send warnings to everyone who could declare war on them. This means that you preserve your own ability to go to war with them, which is useful because if they get the Reformation centres, you don't have to wait 5 years between when the Reformation centre forms there, you de-guarantee them and your truce to run out before you can go declare on them to purge the centre of Reformation. And that's why I pick Bohemia as a strong example, because they very, very often go Protestant. So what you do is, as soon as those Reformation centres hit, if it's someone small, like an Augsburg or something, you declare, force convert them. Done. If it's someone really big, like Bohemia as the example, where you can't force convert them because of their size, instead, physically take the land that connects your land to their land, if you can, and manually convert the province with the centre of Reformation back, which is easier, or sufficiently easy because you've completed religious ideas and you have huge ability to convert heretics. Also interact with the clergy to go get a inquisitor and make sure your stab is high and pass any other decisions that boost missionary strength to get that done. And if you do that, you can usually prevent the centers of reformation converting more than about a half dozen or so of the princes, which helps maintain your ticking imperial authority. Now, don't get too disheartened if you end up with 6, 8 something heretic princes, even though you've done your best to try and purge away as many of the Germanic centers of reformation as you can, although you can also often go and get Denmark ones if they occur there. Getting ones in England, if it occurs in England, is way too hard, but usually if it occurs in England, you don't need to go get it because it spends the first 60 years converting England and Ireland. But anyway, don't get too disheartened if your ticking imperial authority slows because of a couple of heretic princes during the 4th and 5th return. Once you get the 5th done, the influence of heretics on ticking imperial authority will be severely reduced. Consider supplementing your imperial authority income by annexing and adding Balkans, French, and Danish lands to the HRE, and cycling your rulers via abdicate and getting them killed in battle. Just be careful to make sure that everyone's willing to vote for you or would vote for you before you do. Also, it's not actually that hard to go beat up the French once you've had 60% or so of the HRE your ally for 20 or so years. You can usually manage to call in a pretty sizable chunk against France and just overwhelm him, and then start expanding in France and vassal feeding, generating more HRE princes in France, like Normandy, like Provence and Dauphine. It's a useful and viable method. Once you pass the revoke reform, you will drop back down to a sane number of Diplo relations, and you can start focusing on Diplo concentrating and catching up on Diplo tech. Don't worry too much about some of the princes that will be disloyal because they're too big and they have too many Diplo techs ahead of you, so they get a big malice to liberty desire. The worst that they'll do is sit around at home not contributing to your wars. They literally cannot declare independence because you've already completed the previous reform, which prevents them declaring on another prince, and you are inside the HRE, and therefore they can't declare their independence against you, which is really silly because external nations will still try and support their independence, but they can never declare. It's not that they just don't want to declare, they physically can't. And then once you start catching up on these Diplo techs, it's time to prepare your layer cakes, which we'll discuss now. So, layer cakes. Prepare your layer cakes by personally taking land along as much of the Europe-Asian border. Use the geomap modes if you don't know where these demarcations occur in game, as possible. Add them to the HRE and then release as many HRE princes along that border as you can to use to feed and then inherit with the final reform. There are especially rich regions with releasable nations in the Russian Asia border and in Anatolia. We're going to show some in-game footage of explaining some of these setups and feeding your layer cakes. Okay, it's the year 1613. I've set up some HRE layer cakes in Ireland and on England. I've prepared Holstein, which I originally took for myself, but then when I took Golding, I released Holstein and we've set up there. I jumped across to Shonen, Bleking, Gotland, Revel, which lets me do Estonia, and also then lets me do Novgorod, who we added. We're going to have to integrate him manually, sadly, because the Commonwealth have blocked me coming around here. But, you know, gotta live. Over here, I've set up some basic layering preparation. We've got Karamoran, Kandar, Trebizond, Trebizond and Karamoran we can feed the inside here. Karamoran, Ramazan, Dolkadir, AQ, and I'm coring and converting at the moment so that I can do Armenia and Georgia to add down this way. I've also prepared Crete. I should try and do Cyprus, and I should have done Mentesi and Teki or whoever they are here, but I forgot before their cores ran out. Alright, skipping ahead. Alright, it's 1658 now. I've completed the integration of that Novgorod and reached around much of Russia. I can't actually release the vassals yet because I'm in other wars, but I'm all set to release a Kazan, a Nogai, a Bashkiria, a Perm. I'll take some more land and also do a Golden Horde, and we can come out that way. The Georgia that I talked about is now existent, and the AQ, Dolkadir, and Armenia that we talked about releasing have all started to grow down here. I'm feeding Kandar and Trebizond, some more of the interior of the Ottomans. And we've done quite a good job of jumping across Suez over here. So Crete now has Suez itself. Karaman has come across one province to the right. Ramazan has come across one trio of provinces even further right. I'm coming down along there so that I can keep holy warring people, because we still aren't near it. We still haven't got imperialism. And I've, along the left-hand side, prepared the way for Ferrara, who's going to come down there. So that's going to go Croatia, there, Ferrara, here, and along the inside, Siena. I released Albania and Montenegro and have been feeding them Northern Africa, along with Sardinia and Catalonia. The feeding of the ones that we had set up last time in England is going brilliantly. England are about 2/3 dead. Over here in Sweden, the feeding of Holstein, Mecklenburg and Gotland proceeds. And that's about it for this timestamp. On to the next one. Okay, jumping ahead now to 1687, we can see I've set up those vassals along the Russian border that I said I would, including an Astrakhan. Georgia, Armenia, AQ and Dalkadir continue to grow. We've jumped, the Egyptian ones have grown a bit more. So have the North Africans, and I've just set up, jumping around some of the North Germans and some of the West Italians, not only into North Africa, but then all the way around in here to Congo, and we're going to go across with our layers in Congo. And we finished off the Ottomans. That's about news for this timestamp. And we finished England. Well, they have this, Connaught, a couple of little islands, and they have Bermuda, but otherwise they're daddy bones. So jumping ahead to the next timestamp, and here we are in 1759. We can see the Congolese layer cake has gone well, and we jumped around some of the ones that we couldn't grow because there are only so many province widths around into the Mutapa region, as well as into Madagascar. You can see the layers working beautifully down East Africa. We jumped these two across to here, and then they're going to go across into more of India. Dalkadir, AQ, Armenia, Georgia, Astrakhan, and look at how our Russian ones have grown all across the steppes. It's brilliant. The writing's on the wall. We've just got to dot our I's, cross our T's, and the series will be done. Well, the world conquest will be done. Cool. Onwards. Finish off feeding them. Click that integrate button, and you will be the undisputed master of the world. Just you and your bitches. And I do like that it changes all their tag. Like when you change tag, it also changes all the colonial nations flags as well. So the ones that used to be Castile and Brazil and La Plata and French and everyone else are now all have proper flags. One last thing will be to discuss the idea groups. I went quantity then religious. I would actually personally suggest going religious slightly first if you can manage, but that's fine. Administrative, offensive, expansion, defensive. Then I went diplomatic, but I got rid of that when I was finishing some integration of a bunch of client states, and aristocratic for the lulls at the end, because, well, what else am I going to take? Naval. I mean, everything was already done. There was nothing left to do. And it's the first world conquest I've done that didn't at any point actually take exploration, which was interesting and new. In any case, I hope you have enjoyed this video tutorial on a very easy to execute, very hard world conquest setup, and you might even join me for the whole series. See you soon. Bye.